Okay, so we're going to start our discussion on absolute value. So this first day, since it is just your completely remote day, very simple, reviewing what absolute value is and a few problems of just evaluating things with absolute value in them. So to give you some contextual understanding of what it might be, we have this first initial problem. It says, in 2007, a telephone poll was conducted to determine the reading habits of people in the US. People in the survey were allowed to select more than one type of book. So we can see over here, 66% said religious, 50% popular fiction, 20% romance. The survey had a margin of error of plus or minus 3%. So you are going to have a handful of questions in your homework assignment talking about margin of error. Margin of error means that the results could be 3 points higher or lower. So think about it as a survey went out. It is impossible to survey every single person that exists. So this margin of error gives you some leeway on both ends. So if the margin of error is plus or minus 3%, then if we're talking about religious books, if 66% said yes, that plus or minus says that I could probably be anywhere really from 69% down to 63%, just to account for those people that were not involved in the survey. This is an example of your absolute value. Absolute value calculates your distance from a centerpiece, typically 0. So the distance between 66 and 69 on the number line is exactly the same as between 63 and 66. So that margin of error is 3% on both ends. Ties into that idea of absolute value because absolute value talks about the distance a value is from 0. So since we are talking about distances, you can never measure something to be negative. So absolute values are always positive. That is the idea of what we're talking about up here. So when my center point is 66, no matter whether I'm talking about 69% or 63%, both of those are 3 away. So my margin of error is 3% on both ends. Your absolute value is the distance a number is from 0. So again, if I even think about this as just a basic number line without any context behind it, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So the absolute value of 3 is asking, what am I writing here? The absolute value of 3 is asking you, well, how far away from 0 is 3? So I have 1, 2, 3 spaces. Whereas if I talk about, well, what is the absolute value of -3? How far away from 0 is -3? It's the same. I have 1, 2, 3 spaces. So no matter whether you're talking about the positive or the negative value, your absolute value is always positive because measuring a distance always has to be positive. What we want to be familiar with today is just practicing evaluating with absolute value and remembering those orders of operation, because whenever you come back into the building tomorrow, we're going to get into solving equations that have absolute value bars in them. So 1 and 2, I have the absolute value of m plus 6 minus 14 if m is equal to 4. So the first step is to take that 4 and plug it in. So whenever we're evaluating, we want to be very careful to show each step. Step number 1 is to always just replace the variable with the value. And then we're just going to go through the orders of operation. Remember, parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division are on the same level, always right to left. Addition and subtraction, always on the same level, always right to left. Parentheses come first, but now that we're getting more involved in higher level math, grouping symbols come first. Absolute value is just another way to think about a parenthesis or a grouping symbol. So you're always going to simplify inside of those absolute value symbols first. So inside of those bars, I see 4 plus 6. So I'm going to add that to get 10. Then you want to take your absolute value. So there's still something to do. There's one number, but I want to figure out what is the absolute value of 10. How far away from 10, or how far away from 0 is 10? We have 10. Now I have 10 minus 14. So if I'm at 10 and I subtract 14 from it, that gives us -4. So notice that whenever we're talking about absolute value, we're saying that your answer always has to be positive. When you're specifically only taking absolute value of a number, you're doing a problem here. Your final answer is allowed to be negative because I'm calculating an absolute value, but then subtracting 14 from it. So no matter what this chunk is, if it's anything less than 14, my final answer is going to be negative. If we look at number 2, I have 23 minus the absolute value of 3 minus 4x if x is equal to 2. So step number 1 is to always just plug your number in. 23 minus 3 minus 4 times 2. Always plug in with your parentheses so you're keeping everything organized. And now just start your orders of operation over. Parentheses or grouping symbol means do your absolute value first. So I have everything in here that I'm going to simplify. Inside of those bars, I notice multiplication, so that comes first. I see that I have 4 times 2, so I'm going to bring that down as an 8, and then bring everything else down along with it, only moving one step at a time. I still have more to do inside